Okay, so you want to own an oil change shop. Drive-through bay, car rolls in, tech drains the old oil, pours in the new stuff, customer pays, car rolls out. 10 minutes, $40, 50, 60 times a day. You do the math in your head, and it sounds like one of the simplest businesses on earth. No inventory that expires, no complicated menu, no reservations, no seasons, no trends to chase. Just oil, a filter, and a line of cars that never ends, because every engine on the road needs fresh oil, whether the economy is good or terrible. Walk into any quick-lube bay on a Saturday morning, and you'll see a line of cars wrapped around the building before the doors even open. The tech, standing in the pit below, looking up at the underside of a Ford Explorer, reaches up and cracks the drain plug. Hot oil pours out like black honey into the recovery drum. There's a warm petroleum smell in the air, not unpleasant, just industrial. 15 seconds later, the stream thins to a drip. The guy on top yells, "Clear!" Fresh synthetic goes in, filter gets swapped, hood drops, and the next car is already rolling forward before the first one has pulled out of the lot. 10 minutes, start to finish. $63 on the receipt. That's a full synthetic with the shop supplies fee. And here's the part that hooks people when they first look at this business. The oil and filter in that job cost about $10.50 wholesale. 82% gross margin on every single car. Looks like a printing press. But the oil change itself, that's not where the money is, not even close. So where does it actually come from? The United States has roughly 289 million registered vehicles on the road. The average car is now 12.6 years old, the oldest on record, and older engines running past their warranty window are exactly who walks into a quick-lube on a Saturday. And despite what social media will tell you about electric vehicles, EVs still represent less than 2.5% of the total operating fleet. Almost all of those 289 million cars still need oil. The quick-lube industry generates between $11 and $13 billion a year across roughly 10,000 specialized locations. Jiffy Lube runs about 2,050. Valvoline Instant Oil Change has around 1,900. Take 5 has grown to over 1,350. And then there are thousands of independents, regional chains, and one-off shops in every suburb in America. There are 3 ways into this business. The first is a national franchise. Jiffy Lube, Valvoline, Take 5, Grease Monkey. You pay a franchise fee between $30,000 and $45,000, plus a total initial investment ranging from around $211,000 on the low end for a conversion to north of $3 million for a ground-up build with real estate. In exchange, you get a recognized brand, national fleet contracts with Enterprise and Hertz, bulk oil pricing from Shell or Pennzoil, and a marketing machine that drives customers in without you spending your weekends on Facebook ads. What you give up is 8 to 12% of your gross revenue. Royalties, advertising fund contributions, technology fees. Every dollar that crosses your register, the franchisor takes their cut before you pay a single employee. The second option is independent. You build your own brand, pick your own oil vendors, set your own prices. No royalty bleeding off the top line. On a $1 million store, that saves you $80,000 to $120,000 a year, but you're buying oil at retail adjacent prices instead of bulk refiner contracts. You have zero access to national fleet management programs that send 15 to 25% of weekday traffic to franchise locations on autopilot. And every customer you acquire costs more because nobody's heard of you. The third is conversion. You find an existing auto repair shop or gas station with unused bays, strip it down, refit it for quick-lube, and open under either a franchise flag or your own brand. Lowest capital outlay, $150,000 to $400,000, but your site selection is limited to whatever happens to be available rather than whatever happens to be optimal. And in this business, site selection is everything. Before you change your first quart of oil, you need a piece of land. Not just any land. You need a commercial corner pad on a road carrying at least 20,000 vehicles per day, with a 25 to 45 mile per hour speed limit. Fast enough for traffic flow, slow enough that people can actually see your sign, think about it, and turn in. You want the right side of the road for evening commute traffic heading home. Nobody makes a left turn across rush hour traffic to get an oil change. They drive past you every single day and never stop. A prime pad site in a major suburban market, the outskirts of Dallas, Phoenix, or Atlanta, costs between $600,000 and $1.6 million just for the dirt. Then you build. A proper quick-lube facility with 2 to 3 service bays runs $350,000 to $1.1 million in construction. And here's something nobody tells you until you're already talking to contractors. If you're building a pit-style shop, which is the traditional quick-lube format where the tech works below the car rather than on a hydraulic lift, that pit is an engineering project. It's 4.5 to 5 feet deep, poured reinforced concrete, and every square inch of it must be coated in chemical-resistant epoxy to prevent motor oil from seeping through the concrete and contaminating the groundwater below. That epoxy coating alone costs $8,000 to $12,000 per bay. The floor needs a minimum 2% drainage slope toward a collection sump with a dedicated oil-water separator tied into the municipal drain. If your pit doesn't meet EPA specifications before you open, you don't get a permit. A 3-bay pit, fully engineered with drainage, coating, and structural reinforcement, runs $45,000 to $75,000 before a single piece of equipment goes in above it. Then, the equipment. Bulk oil storage tanks, double-walled per EPA regulation, holding 500 to 1,000 gallons each of 3 to 4 oil grades plus waste oil. Pneumatic pumps, hose reels, electronic metering guns that track dispensed volume to the 10th of a quart, hydraulic lifts or pit safety systems, point-of-sale terminals with digital menu boards. The full equipment package runs $120,000 to $240,000. Then there's the SPCC compliance plan the EPA requires for any facility storing more than 1,320 gallons above ground. Add the oil-water separator at $15,000 to $30,000. Add 3 to 6 months of working capital to cover payroll and rent before you hit profitability. All in, you've spent somewhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million. And that pit, the one you stand inside looking up at the underside of someone's car, that alone cost you $75,000. You haven't changed a single drop of oil yet. Here's something weird about this business. All that used motor oil draining out of customer vehicles, you'd assume you pay someone to haul it away. Hazardous waste, liability, environmental disposal costs. But under normal market conditions, when crude is trading above $60 a barrel, re-refiners like Safety Clean and Clean Harbors actually pay you to collect it, between 15 and 45 cents per gallon. A busy 3-bay shop draining 40 to 50 cars a day generates roughly 1,000 to 1,500 gallons of used oil per month. At 30 cents a gallon, that's $300 to $450 a month you receive for waste you were expecting to pay to remove. Small money in the grand scheme, but it's one of those strange inversions where your waste stream is someone else's feedstock. There's a catch. If that used oil gets contaminated, if a tech accidentally dumps antifreeze or brake cleaner into the waste oil tank, it's no longer recyclable. It becomes hazardous waste under EPA classification, and removing it costs you $1.50 to $3.50 per gallon instead of earning you money. One careless mistake by one new guy on one busy afternoon turns a small revenue source into a $4,000 cleanup bill. Now, here's what happens when the cars actually start rolling in. A conventional oil change uses about 5 quarts of bulk oil. Your wholesale cost on conventional is roughly $7.50. The filter costs you about $3. Total materials per car, $10.50. You charge the customer $60. Gross margin, 82%. Full synthetic uses better base stock. Your cost goes up to about $17.50 for the oil, $4 for a premium filter. Total, $21.50. You charge $95. Gross margin, 77%. Looks incredible either way, until you subtract everything else. Labor looks simple on paper until you try to staff a Saturday. On a normal weekday, you run 3 to 4 techs per shift at $14 to $20 an hour, plus a store manager at $22 to $30. That's your baseline crew. But what the industry calls your day-part mix, meaning how revenue spreads across the week, isn't flat. Between 30 and 42% of your entire weekly revenue is concentrated into Friday afternoon and Saturday. Saturday is the single biggest day in this business. Every car owner who is too busy during the work week shows up between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. You need a full pit crew on deck, upper bay tech, lower pit tech, service advisor at the window, and an inventory runner restocking filters and fluids from the back. If you're short-staffed on Saturday, you're not just losing that day's revenue, you're losing those customers permanently because they'll find the competitor down the road who didn't have a 40-minute wait. Let me walk you through the full P&L of a franchise location doing $1.2 million in annual revenue. That's roughly 53 cars a day at a $73 average ticket, 6 days a week, about 310 days a year. COGS, meaning oil, filters, and ancillary fluids, takes 24%. That's $288,000. Labor, 4 techs plus a store manager plus payroll taxes and workers' comp takes 21%. That's $252,000. Your triple net lease takes 8%, $96,000. Royalty and advertising fund together take 10%, $120,000. Insurance, environmental compliance, and waste oil handling take another 2.5%, about $30,000. Credit card processing fees, because almost nobody pays cash anymore, take 3%, $36,000. Equipment maintenance and replacement reserves take 5%, $60,000. Still with me? Good, because this is where it gets depressing. Utilities, POS software licensing, marketing co-op, and miscellaneous take another 7.3%, about $88,000. What remains is your EBITDA, $230,000, a 19.2% operating margin. Then your loan payment on the $800,000 you borrowed at 7.5% over 10 years takes another $114,000 per year. Your net before taxes as the owner of $1 million plus revenue business is roughly $116,000 a year. You invested $800,000. You're earning a 14.5% cash-on-cash return. Sounds acceptable. Until you account for the 50 hours a week you're spending inside that building. If you paid someone else to do those hours at $45, which is the going rate for a multi-unit GM in this industry, your entire net income disappears into that salary. Your true investment return is effectively zero. You're not an investor. You're a very expensive employee of your own company. So how do the owners who actually build wealth in this business escape that math? They sell more than oil. Here's the part most people never see coming. The real product of a quick-lube shop isn't the oil change. The oil change is a marketing expense. It's the reason a customer pulls into your bay and sits there, captive, for 10 minutes while your technician has unrestricted access to their vehicle and their attention. The money is in what happens during those 10 minutes. Your tech pulls the engine air filter during the standard inspection. Takes about 40 seconds while the oil is draining anyway. He walks it over to the driver's window and holds it up next to a brand new white one from the shelf. That filter cost you $6 wholesale. You charge $42. The customer sees black dust packed between the pleats and hears the tech say, "This dirt is getting pulled into your engine cylinders right now, reducing your fuel economy and accelerating internal wear." That framing isn't an accident. It's loss aversion. People feel the sting of losing something about twice as hard as the pleasure of gaining something equal. The customer isn't choosing between spending $42 and saving $42. They're choosing between $42 and the possibility of engine damage. The conversion rate on that pitch is between 45 and 60%. 90 seconds of work, $36 of pure profit. And that's just the filter. A transmission fluid flush costs you $22 to $35 in materials. You charge $135 to $200. Profit, $113 to $165 per car. A coolant flush costs $15 to $25. You charge $115 to $170. Brake fluid exchange, $10 to $16 in materials, $90 to $140 charged. Wiper blades, $4 to $8 cost, $30 to $50 charged. A tire rotation costs you literally nothing in materials. It's pure labor that's already on the clock, and you charge $20 to $35. Every single add-on in this business carries margins between 83 and 100%. Across all customers, between 35 and 48% accept at least one upsell during their visit. On average, each car that rolls through adds $25 to $48 in upsell revenue when you spread it across everyone, including the ones who say no to everything. Upsell services represent only 35 to 40% of total revenue, but contribute over 60% of net profit. The oil change gets the car in the door. The $42 air filter is the actual product. The menu board at the entry kiosk isn't a list of services, it's a psychological weapon. The most expensive option always sits at the top. Full synthetic premium service, $109.99. Below it, the synthetic blend, $74.99. Below that, the basic conventional at $59.99. This is anchoring. The $109.99 exists primarily to make $74.99 feel like the sensible middle ground choice. The customer who drove in planning to spend $40 on a basic oil change now spends $75 on the blend package and feels responsible about the decision. They were never going to buy the premium. The premium exists so they'd buy the middle. And the entire service interaction is framed around default architecture. The advisor doesn't ask, "What type of oil would you like today?" The advisor says, "Your vehicle manufacturer calls for 0W20 full synthetic, so we'll get that set up for you." Full synthetic is now the default. Opting down requires the customer to actively say, "No, I want the cheaper one," which feels weirdly confrontational when someone just told you what your car needs. Most people don't push back. The mix shifts toward higher ticket services without anyone feeling pressured. Now, here's what can go wrong. In 2016, the California Bureau of Automotive Repair ran dozens of undercover sting operations across 36 Jiffy Lube locations operated by a single large franchisee. Investigators brought in vehicles with no maintenance issues and documented what services were recommended and billed. The findings were systematic. Locations charged for fluid flushes that were never performed, billed for filter replacements that didn't happen, recommended services the vehicle didn't need based on manufacturer schedules. The result was $220,000 in enforcement penalties, 3 years of regulatory probation, and store-level suspensions. Separately, Heartland Automotive Services, Jiffy Lube's single largest franchisee at the time, agreed to pay $47 million to settle a class action under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act for blasting unsolicited marketing texts to millions of customers without consent. The deeper structural risk is market saturation driven by private equity. In 2016, Roark Capital acquired Take 5 Oil Change when the chain had about 50 locations. Over the next 8 years, they scaled it to more than 1,350. That's a compound annual growth rate north of 50%. Driven Brands, the parent company, went public in January 2021 at around $22 a share, peaked above $33 in early 2022, and the market cap hit roughly $5.6 billion at the top. The thesis was simple. Quick-lube economics are excellent at the unit level, so build as many as possible, as fast as possible. The problem is what happens when every suburb in America has 3 express oil change shops within 2 miles of each other. Same-store sales growth turned negative. New locations cannibalized existing ones. By 2025, that stock was trading in the $12 to $15 range, meaning investors who bought at the IPO had lost nearly half their money, and anyone who bought near the peak lost 2/3. The lesson echoes what happened in the car wash industry. The individual unit works. The leveraged roll-up chasing growth into saturated markets destroys value at the portfolio level. And then there's the long-term question. Electric vehicles don't need oil changes. Period. No engine, no oil. In 2026, EVs represent only about 2 to 2.5% of the total registered vehicle fleet. The average car stays on the road for over 12 years. Even if every new car sold tomorrow were electric, it would take well over a decade before the installed base shifted enough to meaningfully impact oil change demand. The major chains are already adding EV-compatible services: battery thermal coolant flushes, tire rotations for vehicles that burn rubber faster due to instant torque, brake fluid service for systems where regenerative braking causes moisture accumulation. But the core revenue engine, the thing that makes this business work today, is still 280 million internal combustion vehicles that need fresh oil every 5,000 to 10,000 miles. That window is open. It won't stay open forever. Let me show you what a good year looks like versus a bad year at the same store. Same location, 3-bay franchise. Year 1 build cost of $1.2 million all in. In a good year, your car count hits 55 a day. Your upsell acceptance rate is 45%, which means almost half your customers are buying a flush or a filter on top of the oil change. Average ticket climbs to $82, up from the $73 baseline because more people are saying yes. Annual revenue hits $1.4 million. Your EBITDA is $308,000, a 22% margin. After debt service, you net around $230,000. You start looking at lease opportunities for a second location. In a bad year, and this isn't a disaster, this is a completely normal bad year, a Take 5 opens 1 mile away 18 months after you do. Your daily car count drops from 55 to 35. You cut your basic price to $44.99 trying to hold volume. Your lead pit tech, the guy who could flip a car in 8 minutes and upsell a transmission flush without breaking eye contact, leaves for the new shop because they offered $3 more an hour and a signing bonus. Another tech follows him a week later. The replacements can't upsell. Your acceptance rate falls from 45% to 28%. Your pit drain pump fails in month 8. Emergency repair costs $14,000 and you lose 2 days of revenue while the bay is offline. Annual revenue drops to $780,000. EBITDA is $62,000. After debt service, you net $55,000. That's $21 an hour for a 50-hour week. The same wage your new pit tech earns. The gap between those two outcomes, $230,000 versus $55,000 on the same investment, is more than 4 to 1. And the cause was not a pandemic, not a recession, not a freak accident. It was 1 new competitor, 2 lost employees, and a 10-year NNN lease you can't escape. The owners who survive this business and eventually build real wealth share a few common traits. First, they think in multiples. A single store owner is always 1 bad lease away from working for free. 3 to 5 stores lets you spread regional management costs, qualify for bulk oil rebates from refiners that add 2 to 4% straight to your bottom line, and absorb the impact of 1 bad location without it killing your income. Second, they lock in fleet contracts before opening day. Enterprise, Hertz, Donlin, Element Fleet, Lease Plan. These accounts send 15 to 25% of your weekday traffic automatically with guaranteed payment terms. Fleet cars come in on schedule, no upselling required, predictable ticket, predictable volume. They flatten out the ups and downs that kill a single store owner. Third, they obsess over retention. That oil sticker on the windshield, the one that says your next service is due at 47,500 miles, that's the cheapest CRM tool in existence. Operators call the gap between visits windshield time, and the goal is to shrink it. Automated text reminders at the 4,500-mile mark bring customers back before they drive past someone else's sign. Some operators run a reciprocity play, free fluid top-offs between visits, free tire pressure checks, complimentary windshield cleaning. These cost almost nothing, but create a loyalty loop that pushes retention rates above 65%. That's the number that separates a compounding business from a treadmill. Fourth, they study the exit. A single profitable quick-lube sells for 4.5 to 6.5 times EBITDA, meaning a shop netting $230K sells for roughly $1 million to $1.5 million. A regional portfolio of 5 to 20 stores sells for 8 to 11 times. A platform with 50-plus locations commands 12 to 15 times from institutional PE buyers. The terminal play isn't run one shop forever. It's build, stabilize, multiply, and sell the portfolio to someone who values recurring customers more than you do. In 2023, Saudi Aramco paid $2.65 billion for Valvoline's branded lubricant products business, the consumer oil you buy at Walmart, while Valvoline spun off its 1,900 quick-lube retail stores as a separate, publicly traded company. The world's largest oil producer looked at the entire petroleum value chain and decided the best return wasn't in pumping crude, it was in putting their name on the bottle that goes into your engine. That tells you something about where the real margin lives. What does an owner actually take home? A single-unit owner-operator running their own store, hands-on, 50 hours a week, nets between $172,000 and $253,000 a year. An absentee owner who hires a general manager at $55,000 to $75,000 base, plus performance bonuses, sees their net drop to $95,000 to $160,000 per unit. A 5-store portfolio pulling in $6.2 million combined gives you $700,000 to $1 million net after you've paid everyone. The threshold for truly passive ownership in this business is 3 to 5 locations minimum. Below that, you're either working in the business or paying a manager who eats most of your margin. And even at 3 locations, passive is a generous word. Your store manager calls at 6:45 a.m. because the bulk oil pump is throwing an error code and the first customer is already in the bay. A tech no-showed on Saturday and the line is backing onto the street. A Yelp review went up overnight claiming your shop stripped someone's drain plug and oil leaked all over their driveway. Your waste oil tank alarm triggered because the float sensor is reading full at 800 gallons instead of 1,000, and you need to figure out whether it's a sensor malfunction or someone actually overfilled it before your next scheduled pickup. None of that will bankrupt you, but all of it needs someone who actually knows the business to make a call. The owners who call this passive income are the ones with 10-plus locations and a regional ops director on salary handling everything below a certain dollar threshold. Everyone else is running a business that calls them at breakfast. So here's the honest answer. Same owner, same city, same $800,000 investment. The version who researched the competitive radius before signing a lease, who verified that no empty commercial pads within a mile were zoned for automotive use, who negotiated a non-compete clause into the ground lease, who signed 2 fleet management contracts before opening day, who hired 3 experienced techs with retention bonuses built into their first-year comp. That owner nets $230,000 a year and opens a second store by year 4. The version who picked a high-traffic site without checking what was going to be built on the vacant lot next door, who signed a 10-year NNN lease with no exit clause, who hired the cheapest available labor and watched them get poached 18 months later. That owner nets $55,000 a year and earns the same hourly wage as the technicians standing in the pit beneath the cars. The difference isn't talent. It's not work ethic. It's not the business model. It's a handful of decisions made before the first car ever rolled in. The oil was never the product. It was the reason someone pulled in long enough for you to sell them everything else.